Archdiocese of Chicago is a vibrant and diverse faith community. We celebrate our faith through worship, evangelization, and reaching out to the needy. Welcome to Catholic Chicago.
Good morning, welcome to Catholic Chicago. I'm Father Greg Sakowitz, the rector of Holy Name Cathedral here in Chicago. And to my left, Mark Teresi, a great friend who is involved with the 175th anniversary and the 150th anniversary coming up this November. And Mark, welcome to the program together with you.
Well, and we're finishing up the mosaic that we're going to dedicate in May. Do you want to you went to the last session. What was that like?
It was incredible. It's the mosaic is an opportunity in our courtyard to have this huge mosaic put together by parishioners, and the main teacher was Jordan, who was a wonderful young man, and the whole theme of the mosaic is pilgrims of hope. Pilgrims of hope, and it's hard to describe. It'll be so beautiful. It's something you have to see.
And 80 plus parishioners worked on it.
Exactly, over a period of about 3 months.
Yeah.
And so we have a great program lined up today. Great little read here. Established in 1934, the Catholic Lawyers Guild of Chicago is a Chicago-based bar association that is organized to promote the social, intellectual, temporal, and spiritual welfare of its members. Some of the current initiatives of the Guild include anti-racism, restorative justice, and intellectual formation, and organizes several events throughout the year, including the Catholic Lawyers Guild Lenten Retreat that will take place this year on March 29th, which happens to be this Saturday, at Catholic Theological Union at 5416 South Cornell Avenue in Chicago. Join us for this program this morning to talk about the Catholic Lawyers Guild, our Cook County Circuit Court Judge, Thomas Moore Donnelly, and Deacon Dan Welter from Holy Name Cathedral. So Tom and Dan, welcome to the program this morning.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Now, both of you go back as friends. You met, 35 years ago?
Yes.
Right.
And Mark and I go back over 50 years ago. Now, I had a surprise question for you, Tom. I warned you about it, but here's a surprise. I've never seen you without a bow tie. What is the history of the bow tie?
So I was a young lawyer practicing at 26 in California as a public defender. And I would occasionally wear a bow tie. And my mentor, Mike Morrissey, who was head of the murder task force at that time, said, "Tom, we don't wear those around here." So that just spurred me. My old Irish got out, and I wore it all the time just to show him I'm going to wear this and bring it back. But I got some adverse reactions from inmates in the lockup because I'd come in with a bow tie and they'd say, "Pee Wee Herman!" And I said, "No, Fahey Flynn."
Yeah.
And they didn't know who that was.
Fahey Flynn was famous for the bow tie.
Always.
Of course, Pee Wee Herman. But then you've worn a bow tie ever since.
Ever since.
So you can tell this is going to be an in-depth interview.
We'd like to thank you for joining us for the program here today. And Dan, you were the former chancellor of the Archdiocese of Chicago.
Correct.
Now full-time staff at Holy Name Cathedral.
Right.
With a tremendous number of ministries. You're phenomenal. Been ordained a permanent deacon what year?
1991. I come up on 34 years next month.
Oh,
And out of curiosity,
congratulations.
what led you to the diaconate program? I'm sure you had to have a mentor or someone who guided you or invited you. What a little bit of story about your background with that?
Well, I was in the seminary, as you know, for 7 years, and decided that priesthood was not my calling. Tom Healy, who you know, was at the seminary at that time, and he said, "Dan, you'll serve the church in some capacity one day, but find your path now." And I did, to the law, and I was lucky enough after some time with the City of Chicago's Law Department to be appointed as an associate judge of the Circuit Court, where I served for 22 years. And during that time, the call to the diaconate was there, and my pastor at the time, the late Bishop Raymond Geddert, said, "You ought to consider this." And it was Ray Gettert, and I know of no priest that I hold in higher esteem than Ray Gettert. And so I entered the program, was ordained, had to go before 2 panels actually because my work as a judge and my vocation as a deacon, we wanted to make sure that they would jive. And they only found 2 issues that were a problem. I couldn't hear death penalty cases, which I was pleased, and I couldn't hear divorces. And I was also glad not to have to do that. But I was able to combine my ministry with my work. The law is based on the highest calling, and is based on mercy as well as justice. And those have to be combined as we do this work.
And you have such a pastoral approach. We've worked with couples that are getting married and maybe not on the straight track, and you bring them back. You bring them back to church, which is really
And ironically,
important.
both Tom and Dan, incredibly pastoral,
Yeah.
caring, you know, as a judge, as a permanent deacon, the work that you do. But your Christ-likeness shows forth through your ministry. When you think about it, in the work that you do, Tom, it's about service, about bringing justice, helping others. Dan, certainly for you. The Catholic Lawyers Guild, when did it begin? What, like in 1934? But what is the Catholic Lawyers Guild?
So guilds in the medieval sense were all about how our work as lay people is bringing Christ to the world through our vocation.
Right.
And that's been the sense of what a guild is, going back to the, you know, the Tanners Guild and the brewing guilds in medieval times.
In Ireland.
In Ireland and and throughout the rest of the world. And so the guilds in the 12th century in France started for lawyers, and that's where the Red Mass originates, is in the 12th century France. But there was this move in the early part of the 20th century to really bring back guilds, and there was one that started in New York and then in Boston, all around the turn of the century. And the guy who founded it in Chicago was the former president of the CBA, and he decided there should be a Catholic Lawyers Guild to give that sense of that we're bringing Christ to the world through our vocation of law. And that has been the inspiration and continues to be what we try to do, is inspire and recognize where judges like our friend, the late Justice Marianne McMorrow, brought Christ to the world through her excellence as a judge, through her kindness, compassion, through her sense of ethics and excellence, that this is a way of presenting Christ to the world.
Tom, what about your journey? How did you end up practicing the law?
Well, I went to a small school in Santa Fe, New Mexico, a great book school called St. John's. And I worked for a Dominican priest for 2 years after college. And he hoped I had a vocation to the priesthood. And I explored that with the Dominicans and decided, after visiting a lot of the Dominican houses and their seminary, that wasn't for me. And my dad was practicing medicine here in Chicago and was about to do a fellowship in London.
Wow.
And he asked me if I'd come back to Chicago, take care of my 2 youngest siblings, while he went off and did this fellowship with my mom in London.
How old are you at the time?
I was 22.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
Sure.
So I came back to Chicago. I said, what am I going to do? And I just sort of did discernment as to what am I being called to. And I said, what are my skills? Oral presentation, research. And I thought law was a natural place for me. And I applied to Loyola, got accepted. And it's been a wonderful thing for me. The law is, I think, aligned, and I'm sure Dan would agree, with faith, because it's all about interpretation. Just as in the faith life, we are interpreting Scripture, we're living a life that is dedicated to the Word. The law is also dedicated to the Word, understanding the words of law and understanding order, the divine order as it emanates into human law. So I think there's a wonderful harmony between the practice of law and the practice of
Here's
faith.
a question for all 3 of you. I want to include Mark on this one.
No.
It's interesting in listening to the stories, the journey. What unites us, we are 4 men of faith. We are gathered for this podcast presentation today. We're rooted in Christ through our baptism to serve the world. I'm very much aware with all three of you involved with ministry today, but what was your goal and dream when you were in high school? When you were in high school, Dan, what did you want to be when you, quote, grew up?
I wanted to be a priest. I was at Quigley, and Quigley said, you know, we will train you to be a priest. And I wanted that thoroughly. When I was in college, and I discerned out of this vocation, I wanted to be a coach. I wanted to be with people and try to help their lives become something better.
And yet the call to priesthood was answered through the diaconate
Absolutely.
program the last 34 years, and the whole thing of service and help. How about you, Tom?
Well, in high school, I probably similarly wanted to be a priest. I had a very powerful Dominican priest mentor who was my confirmation sponsor, and I really admired him and his preaching and the way he lived his life. And that was what I was probably most powerfully drawn to. But I think, you know, that what I learned is that there's a priesthood of the laity.
Yes.
That offering up the sacrifice of our
Absolutely,
work
yes.
is another kind of participation in the Eucharistic sacrifice.
Like
that if we put our heart and soul into our work, whatever it is, being a janitor or a judge, that is a participation in the Eucharist.
A great line that says, from St. Francis once, preach the gospel at all times, if necessary, use words.
Chapter 15
Mark.
of his rule.
Yeah, exactly. Mark? I know the answer.
It's funny that our studio is here at Quigley, because it's my high school. I came because Father Dick Walker, who was of happy memory, a tremendous priest at St. Clement's,
Yes.
came here. I came here kind of questioning and pursuing, and I have a ring. We had the first class that had rings. We had a prom. You know, I was at Immaculata. I was in their play with all the girls, and I thought, this is telling me something.
You're called to another vocation.
Right, and
But
then
Mark,
I did go to Niles and had a wonderful experience. And one of my spiritual directors said, I've never seen anybody struggle with this decision as much as you have. And I thought part of it was because I wanted to be a dad, I wanted to be a husband, I wanted to be, and I wanted to serve the church. And I've fortunately over these years just been able to do that in a variety of ways. And I love the priesthood. I was at Mundelein for 15 years. I want to support our priests. I think they need that support. It's been such an integrated lifetime.
Now,
for me.
ironically, with my background, I first thought about priesthood back in first grade. Then I got in 8th grade, kind of forgot about it, went to Notre Dame College Prep in Niles. My only goal in life, freshman, sophomore, junior in high school, I want to be a radio and TV sportscaster. Having loved sports and played sports, I had one goal. My father at WGN, radio and television for years. I wanted to be a sportscaster. Ironically, I turned down a scholarship in my senior year to Northwestern in radio and TV with a partial scholarship, went to the seminary. But here's the crux. My senior year at Niles College, I've never shared this story before, my senior year, I actually, in January of 1975, went to my mother and said, Mom, I've decided not to go on to Mundelein. I was having doubts about priesthood. Maybe I'm being called to something else. And so I said, Mom, I think I'm just going to step away, and I gave it 4 years in the seminary. And my mother said, Greg, if you become a priest, if you become a doctor, a lawyer, a dentist, if you become a salesman, sell shoes, no matter what you do, I will always love you. You are my son. At that moment, I made the decision to go on. And I'll tell you why. What I didn't realize for those 4 years, an undercurrent in my life was, am I entering the priesthood to please my mother? Whose vocation is this? My mother said that. I wasn't even looking for that answer. When she said, Greg, what you do, I love you, you're my son, I came to realize, wow, this is what I want, not what my mother wants. And that so freed me. Entered Mundelein, ordained in '79, and the rest is history. But I've never shared that story.
Well, it's funny because that was the same response my parents gave me when I said I was not going on. And then my mom said, I always thought you wanted to be a husband and a father, but I never said anything because I wanted you to decide. And I thought, it's interesting.
Interesting, same thing.
Wise
So-
Polish mothers.
Exactly. On that note, Mark, take us to break.
We're here at Catholic Chicago. We'll bring you in when we take our break. With Tom Donnelly and Dan Welter. We'll be back in a few minutes. Because one of the things I want to talk about with the Catholic Lawyers Guild is contemporary issues now. What are you looking at, and particularly with our migration issue, with the legal availability of Catholic lawyers to help in that mission? We'll be back in a few minutes. Please stay tuned.
I am a seminarian.
The Church needs compassionate and well-trained priests to help guide each of us through life.
What inspires me, what draws me always to the priesthood is continue to see priests be a beacon of hope for other people.
You can play a part in the education of these young men as they prepare for a life of service to others.
I want to be that beacon of hope too, and it sets my heart on fire.
To support our seminarians, make your gift at archchicago.org/seminarian fund or call 312-534-7959.
This is year 44 for me teaching. When I started here, there were teachers here that had taught me when I was a student. Now I'm the old person. Right now, I teach junior high math. I love when kids find what I'm teaching to be fun and they get it. I see that light bulb go off and it's a thrill. People are always amazed. What? You're here for 44 years? It's hard for me to believe, frankly. I love what I do. Every summer I think, oh, I miss the classroom. Even on the weekends, I think I can't wait to get back on Monday and teach those quadratic equations.
Shape the next generation of leaders. Teach. Apply today at archchicago.org/schooljobs.
We're back, Catholic Chicago. We're with Judge Thomas Donnelly and Deacon Dan Welter, former Judge Dan Welter. We're talking about the Catholic Lawyers Guild, and I'm fascinated with the idea as you're looking at particularly contemporary issues. Where does the Catholic Lawyers Guild fit in to actively being involved? What are the issues, and how are you involved in
So
them?
many ways. First and foremost is probably restorative justice. We have been at the forefront of that, and Matthew Simon, who has been our president and a guiding force, literally, in this area for the Guild, has maintained a steadfast move toward restorative justice, because that's the only real justice that can really come about and for so many people. And there's programs on the south side and the west side now, the Precious Blood Ministry and all are there with that.
Exactly.
And it's been wonderful. The other thing that's been an offshoot of that has been a committee that is dealing with the migrant issue right now.
Right.
And all of those issues that are there. And we're trained as lawyers. We know how to work the system. And so many other people don't. And so many people that are here with nothing need someone to do this. And we're involved in that part of it. And the other thing that we're doing is for the church itself. So many of our senior priests, with all due respect, Father, don't have wills.
Yeah,
Don't have powers of attorney for health care. And we have members of our guild who are ready to do this pro bono for them, and it's been wonderful to see these kind of activities. Those are just a few of the things we're in.
Yeah, I mean, the restorative justice initiative, the Catholic Lawyers Guild is responsible for passing the Illinois Restorative Justice Privilege Law.
Oh, beautiful.
And it was a big achievement, and we're getting an award coming up at the Chicago Bar Association on April 19th for this work at marshaling our Illinois legislature to pass a restorative justice
Which is
privilege
huge.
bill.
It's
and
huge.
you know, Father Dave Kelly,
Oh, sure.
one of the
What a
precious
wonderful
blood
guy.
priests who really started the restorative justice movement here in Chicago, really was one of the biggest proponents, and still now works in the back of the yards community advocating for restorative justice. And we went down, Matthew, Dan Murray, and myself went down and made a trip down there to learn more about what they were doing. And that became
amazing.
the really start of how we as lawyers in the Guild could support the work of restorative justice, which means bringing wholeness to the victim and rejoining the defendant or offender with the community. And so it has a dual function. And Pope Francis is very clear about that. That restorative justice first has to make the victim whole, and it's something that gets left out of the messaging around restorative justice, that victims of violence, victims of theft, have to be made whole, and it's something our justice system doesn't really pay attention to. All they pay attention to, we in the criminal legal system, is punishing offenders. And the victim is often left traumatized and alone, and their human suffering is not attended to. And so what we're hoping to do is, in restorative justice, humanize our legal system. So we pay attention to, first, the suffering of the victim, make sure they're aided if they've been physically harmed or if they've been psychologically harmed, that they're given resources and aid and comfort and compassion and empathy. And then the second stage of this is that with the offender is going to rejoin the community at some point or another. We want to welcome them in and give them the resources they need to become contributing members of society.
You know, this reminds me that I've dealt so much with an individual who is dying, cancer, leukemia, a stroke, whatever the situation is, and so you're visiting the dying person, and sometimes the spouse, in case of a marriage, can be left out because all the focus is on the one who is dying. Let's say an elderly man who is dying, but what about his wife? What about the children?
Another thing that the Guild does is it encourages our membership to understand who they are first, and that is the beloved child of God. I remember one of the homilies, it was now Cardinal Gregory, formerly of Chicago, who said to us, as different as you are from the people that come in front of you, he said this at a Red Mass, on so many levels, he listed about 8 levels. He said, always remember that person in front of you is the beloved child of God, as loved as you are, and treat them with that kind of respect and dignity. And that's something, I sat a criminal bench for most of those 22 years. And that's something I had on my nameplate, on the back of it. Before you was the beloved child of God. And it made a whole difference in the way I approached my ministry as a judge and how I reacted. Finding someone guilty or not guilty is part of the task. The other part of the task is to find, if there is a finding of guilty, a penalty that is not only just but compassionate. And that was the job.
Now, can I, this is a practical question. Sister Katie Mitchell at our place is working with the migrant families.
Along with Father Joe Tito.
And Father Joe Tito. And we have a group, a Cabrini ministry group, that we're working on it. But she comes to me almost every day. Every one of those families have legal issues. She'll come one day and say, well, I found this lawyer, this is $30,000, and then I found this lawyer and it's X amount of dollars, and she's having a real hard time figuring out where the Catholic legal resources are to help her with these families. Is the Catholic Lawyers Guild looking at that in terms of how they might be a resource?
We are to some extent, and but it's a case of making sure, putting the people together. And we have an obligation as lawyers under our ethical rules to do some pro bono work, all of us. And this is where that can plug in. If we see the need, we will help. That happened under Cardinal George. He needed help with the hearing sessions that were going to go on before the charter was enacted here for the USCCB. And he came to the Guild and we said, can you conduct these as honest brokers? And we did. So we're ready to serve, but we can't solicit this necessarily, but we're ready to react and to help where we can.
And we in the Restorative Justice Committee work closely with Mary Meg McCarthy at National Immigrant Justice Center, she's the leader in serving the migrants in Chicago and in the
And she's located
country.
where?
She's located here in Chicago. And her National Immigrant Justice Center is the preeminent provider of
Absolutely.
legal services. So we closely coordinate with her.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that we do is we've been very supportive of church communities who've welcomed migrants into their buildings. So in Oak Park, at St. Catherine, St. Lucy's, and other places, we have, especially Matthew Simon, has been an advocate for us using unused church buildings to house migrants. And that's been a difficult issue.
It has been a difficult
There's
issue.
a lot of things that have been wrestled with it. But I think the Guild is really
Trying to be proactive.
proactive and understanding that if we don't welcome the stranger, we won't be welcomed in heaven.
Now, we just have a couple minutes left, and we want to talk about the retreat on March 29th. And we are airing this podcast, we're taping on March 27th. So it'll be this Saturday. So for many listeners, it'll be then last week. So the Catholic Lawyers Guild retreat, March 29th, is being led by whom?
Father Ed Shea.
Oh, gosh.
Wonderful.
Tell
Franciscan.
Ed we say hi. Father Shea's
And
a
we
great
will get
priest.
lots of songs during the liturgy.
Yes, yes, you will. He's got a great voice, great singer. Now, it's a yearly retreat. Why?
So since the founding in 1934, one of the things we've always done is a Lenten retreat.
Exactly.
The big thing that lawyers and judges need that we get in the Lenten retreat is an opportunity for confession. So we will have sometimes 4 or 5 confessors, and they're busy all day during the retreat because the life of a lawyer and a judge is centered in conflict.
Yeah.
And the chance for sin, chance for falling short is great. And so this is a time for healing and a restoration for our lawyers and judges because it's a tough life to lead as a practicing lawyer. You take time away from your family.
Yeah.
You're in conflict with others. You're fighting with others for your client. There's always occasions when you're in, the well of the court for things that may not be right.
And it leads the lawyers to understand there is a higher calling. It's not just winning the case, it's not just litigating, but really seeking peace and justice. And a day like this just reminds them of that higher calling that they've been brought to, and hopefully strengthens their ability.
And you're a catalyst for serving the church in a variety of ways, which is wonderful.
Yeah, and about how many lawyers will be expected to come?
Generally we have about 100 lawyers and judges.
All day on a
That's
Saturday.
All day on a
That's
Saturday.
wonderful.
Which, I mean, when you think about it,
And not billable hours.
not billable.
Well, it could be client development.
That's right. It's fascinating to give an all-day Saturday. That's to show you how important this is, to take time away from your daily routine, the work you do, but also it's also taking time away from family, which is very, very critical, which is not a lot from the work you do.
Can I ask what the timing is and location too?
It's down at CTU on Cornell, 5600 South on Cornell. We start at 8:30 with breakfast, and we finish up about 3 o'clock.
So on that note, I want to thank in a very special way Judge Thomas Moore Donnelly, Deacon Dan Welter, who are dear friends, and you are such a gift to the work that you do in the area of law, but also for the church. You're wonderful men of faith, make a difference in the world, and also you're fun, you're joy-filled, and God bless both of you. This has been an outstanding program. So I want to thank again Judge Thomas Moore Donnelly, Deacon Dan Welter, to my partner, great friend, Mark Teresi.
It was a wonderful program.
And to our producer and engineers, we'll have both Clint Cottrell, Michael May for the work they do. We're listening to God bless all of you, and have a great, great continued Lenten season. Amen.